watching ECPN. So today we're going to break down for you the top 32 landmark cases, starting with the Bill of Rights region. Number 1, U.S. versus Lopez is playing number 8, New York Times versus Sullivan. It's going to be a blowout game.
Oh, for sure, especially since Congress exceeded its authority.
Yeah, it was a very important federalism case.
Next up is Civil Rights versus Privacy region.
And the first seed is Brown versus Board of Education, and the 8th seed is Dred Scott versus Sanford. They're both about racial discrimination. However, Dred Scott ruled that slaves do not have citizenship, where Brown versus Board gave African Americans more rights.
I see Brown versus Board winning this one.
I think I agree. Now we're going to be breaking down
Constitutional powers and principles region. In the first seat, we have Marbury versus Madison, a crowd favorite. And in the 8th seat, we have Korematsu versus the U.S.
Marbury versus Madison has been a crowd favorite, as it has allowed the judicial branch to become a check on the other branches, as it rules their laws unconstitutional.
Next up, we have the political process region. And in the first seat, we have Gitlow versus New York. And they're going against, in the 8th seat, Shelby County versus Holder.
Gitlow versus New York is taking the dub on this one, as it provided the incorporation doctrine, which allowed the Bill of Rights to be implemented in the states and not just the federal government. We have a particularly close game in this region, which is Citizens United versus FEC, which is seed 4, and playing seed 5, Buckley versus Vallejo. This is a very close game as they have similar outcomes. Buckley versus Vallejo uses the First Amendment to protect campaign spending by family money and independent expenditures.
Citizens United versus the FEC is about corporations and the First Amendment.
It allows corporations to give a large amount of money, right?
Oh, yes, very large amount. And they're considered people in the First Amendment.
Wow. And this allowed for super PACs to emerge.
Yes.
Which is very controversial.
Oh, yes.
So this should be a close game.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're moving on to the Sweet 16. So what Sweet 16 game do you think we should talk about first?
I think we should talk about Roe v. Wade versus Brown versus Board of Education.
Yes, they're in the civil rights and privacy region. This should be a really close game.
Mm-hmm.
And potential upset, as Roe v. Wade and Brown versus Board of Education are very important cases to this day. Roe v. Wade is still controversial, so I believe it is more important now. What do you think?
I disagree. No. I believe that Brown versus Board of Education will win because it overturned the separate but equal and segregation.
You know what? I think you're right. Separate but equal was not really that equal. Next up, let's talk about the Sweet 16 and the Constitutional Powers and Principles region. I believe the closest game in this region for the Sweet 16 will be the 3rd seed, Heart of Atlanta Motel versus the U.S. versus the 2nd seed, Obergefell versus Hodges. You think that?
I do, because it struck down the state bans on same-sex marriage.
I know. That's a really big case. It's still controversial. And Heart of Atlanta Motel versus the United States allowed Congress to ban segregation in public areas and public accommodations. So I feel like they both touch on certain controversial issues, and it can be a really close game. Next, you got the political process region in their Sweet 16. Mapp versus Ohio versus Kitty versus Wainwright is going to be a big game.
Oh, for sure, especially because Mapp versus Ohio established the exclusionary rule, which stated that illegally obtained evidence could not be used in court.
It's super important, but also Gideon versus Wainwright touches on defendants' right to counsel, which is super important for those in poverty to get their representation. Now on to the Elite Eight. For the last game in the Civil Rights and Privacy region, Miranda versus Arizona versus Brown versus Board of Education. What do you think about that?
I think the Miranda versus Arizona is going to win, and that's all I got to say about that one.
I think I'm getting something.
Oh, what is it?
Incoming news! Brown versus Board of Education won. Good for them.
In the Elite Eight, we have the political process region and Gitlow versus New York versus Mapp versus Ohio.
This will be a good game, but we think that Gitlow versus New York is going to win, and without this case, then people wouldn't have
most of the rights they have today.
In the States, yeah.
Yeah.
A definite potential upset in the Elite Eight for the Bill of Rights region is going to be U.S. versus Lopez versus Shank versus U.S. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think that U.S. versus Lopez is going to win by far.
I think so too. It's just such a landmark case. We think it's a very important case because it was a check on Congress because they exceeded their authority.
Mm-hmm.
Constitutional power.
In the constitutional powers and principles region, it's Marbury versus Madison versus Obergefell versus Hodges.
I think Marbury versus Madison is going to win.
And now to the final four.
Shit.
First off, we have Brown versus Board of Education versus Gitlow versus New York. Case going into the championship is Gitlow versus New York.
We think that Gitlow versus New York won because without the Bill of Rights being implemented in the states, Brown versus Board wouldn't have been able to happen because segregation would have been able to persist in each individual state.
3, 2, go.
On the other side of the bracket, we've got
Marbury versus Madison versus U.S. versus Lopez.
this is probably the biggest game of the year because there's such important cases. Marbury versus Madison established judicial review, which has made all of these cases possible.
Oh, for sure.
But U.S. versus Lopez is also very important. And the one heading to the championship is Marbury versus Madison.
And the winner is
Marbury versus Madison.
And that's all, folks. So we just got kicked out of the library, but we want to say thank you for watching.
and tune in next time to ECPN.
Woo.